Welcome back to GP Fans. We've got another special for you as we take a little closer look at what happened over this year with the sprint qualifying sessions. 3 trials took place at Silverstone, Monza and Interlagos. Were they as successful as Formula 1 was hoping for? And what will happen with the expansion to 6 races for the format in 2022? All will be discussed here, but before we go any further, just hit that subscribe button down below. But now let's get into everything that was and potentially will be sprint qualifying. The history of qualification. Formula 1 is always innovating and experimenting with racing weekends, especially with qualifying. Until 1995, the grid was determined by a 2-session format. It's quite simple as the name suggests. There were 2 qualifying sessions, one on the Friday and one on the Sunday. The driver with the fastest time at the end of the second session would take pole position. A nice idea on paper, but not so successful in practice. It wasn't that exciting to watch really, and especially it was quite frustrating when conditions changed so drastically between a Friday session and a Sunday session. In '96, a new format was introduced, the 1-hour shootout. Drivers were given a maximum of 12 laps in order to try and achieve the fastest time. It seemed like a good solution, at least on paper, but there was a big problem in practice. Many drivers stayed in the garage for much of qualifying, waiting for track conditions to improve, so there really was no spectacle for fans. In 2003, the qualifying format was switched again to one-shot qualifying. The drivers were given only 1 lap during 2 sessions to set the fastest time. This format eventually maintained its position until 2005, with a few changes in between. In 2006, another new format was introduced, the elimination qualifier. The slowest drivers were always being eliminated until only 10 remained. This format was used until the end of 2009, with again a few minor adjustments. Now, the current format that we're used to seeing in the recent years, consisting of 3 qualifying sessions, was introduced in 2010. Q1 is an 18-minute session with the 5 slowest drivers dropping out at the end of it. Q2 is a 15-minute session where again the slowest 5 have to leave the field before we get to the Q3 top 10 shootout as the drivers battle it out for those grid positions. However, Formula 1 isn't done experimenting yet. This year, of course, we have seen the 3-race trial of sprint qualifying. Formula 1 is doing this because of the growing number of young fans coming to the sport. The organisation is concerned that these young fans don't have the time or inclination to watch a 2-hour race on a Sunday, so they hope at least they can get their attention for 30 minutes in a sprint qualifying race. The sprint race weekend, as we know, kicks off with the free practice session on a Friday morning. Before then we go to the usual rigmarole of qualifying as we know it on that Friday evening. We then have a Saturday practice session before there is, of course, the sprint run qualifying session, a 100-kilometre race that takes about 30 minutes or so. That race then determines the starting grid for Sunday's normal Grand Prix. So did it work in 2021? The format divided opinion for sure. Silverstone tested the new format first, and the hype around something new and different certainly had the fans excited going into the weekend. And you have to say, the Friday evening qualification in the British summer sun couldn't have been a more perfectly picturesque setting for Formula 1 to showcase its new format and trigger the intensity of 3 days of meaningful F1 action a little earlier than normal. The sprint race on Saturday gave F1 2 major highlight clips as well that seemed to vindicate the use of the session, with Fernando Alonso weaving through the field on his soft tyres, darting between those who were on the slower mediums in those first few corners, before Sergio Perez's spin on lap 5 highlighted the potential pitfalls of the session, forcing the Mexican driver to start from the back of the grid, which, as we know at this point, could and probably did have major implications on the Constructors' battle this season. For Formula 1, it was almost the dream start at Silverstone. The same sense of action and tension, however, failed to materialise at Monza later in the year. Many drivers commented on how they enjoyed extending the action across the full weekend, of course going with Friday, Saturday and Sunday. However, Saturday's Italian Grand Prix sprint session was very much a procession. Aside from Lewis Hamilton falling down the pecking order in the first corner or so, Monza was a cruise for the majority of its 100-kilometre run, with very little overtaking, as drivers suggested afterwards new ways that the FIA and Formula 1 could adapt the session to make it more impactful on a track like the classic Italian circuit. George Russell suggested the sprint was too short and cars are pretty much driving flat out every single lap, and it doesn't offer enough opportunity between cars to overtake. While Lando Norris felt if you would have it separate to the actual Sunday race and take out the fear of crashing, then drivers might try to be more aggressive with their racing. Either way, it was a stark contrast to the Silverstone spectacle. Now, in Sao Paulo, it was all about Lewis Hamilton. The sprint session had meaning due to the 7-time world champion's disqualification from Friday's qualifying that moved him to the back of the grid for Saturday's sprint session, and all eyes were on him as the audience wondered how many places he could make up in the 24-lap spectacle. And what a show it was. Hamilton tearing through the field was just jaw-dropping, finishing a second behind 4th place Sergio Perez and setting himself up for another stellar run in Sunday's race. But had Lewis not been dropped to the back of the grid for Saturday, would it have been as fun to watch? Well, we don't know, but Hamilton was already taking a 5-place grid penalty for Sunday's race, but we knew that the Mercedes was so powerful that weekend as demonstrated on Friday. He and Verstappen might have been tangling through the first few corners, but the Mercedes speed was so sensational that it feels like we'd have been treated to a more mundane Saturday had it not been for the stewards' decision to penalise Hamilton, or had Mercedes not given their driver a DRS system that failed to meet the sport's regulations. There was at least a split of the medium and soft tyres in Brazil for the session, which gave a slightly more exciting race, but also gave some insight into Sunday's strategy as well for the main race. The future. Formula One CEO Stefano Domenicali has already confirmed before Interlagos' final sprint test run that 6 races next season would feature the new qualifying format, although we don't know which tracks are going to be used for it. The vast majority of the comments we receive were super positive, Domenicali said on Formula1.com. Promoters are super happy because there is something new and important on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. We are receiving this positive feedback, therefore we need to know next year we have a great plan where we will consider also the points highlighted by people who did not like this format. Generally speaking, it has been an incredible success. I can say we will not go everywhere with the sprint format. The drivers seem to like the extended weekend format as well, but accept the style of the sprint needs tweaking, with George Russell also suggesting that maybe a softer tyre for the sprint race will bring tyre degradation into the equation more, as we saw on the soft tyres to some extent in Brazil. But Formula One's confirmation of the expansion of the format before that final test run shows that it's been a financial success according to the sponsors, and race events are eager to host the new format next season. But F1 just needs to do a couple of things very carefully. Firstly, picking the correct tracks to carefully avoid a procession like we saw at Monza this season, and also to find a way to bring rogue elements perhaps into the event without it being gimmicky. Don't lose the purist fans of Formula One in an attempt to chase the expansion of the sport and find viewers in that youth market. We want to know your thoughts on sprint qualifying here at GP Fans, so let us know if you like the format and perhaps what tweaks you could suggest in the comments section below. And of course, hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with everything that we do here at GP Fans.